On February 3rd, Sam Altman sat down with a group of students at the University of Tokyo to have a conversation about AI, kind of where it is today, what it looks like in the near future, what jobs might look like, how we might power it, his ideas on open source. It was a great conversation that they had, and I wanted to share a little bit with you. Let's take a look.
And so if you give our students some advice, what type of talent and skills you mostly think that is more precious, important?
In terms of specifics, like are you gonna be better at the AI at math, or a better programmer than the AI on its own, or better at physics? The answer is no, you will not be better at any of those things. And so specific skills, you'll be able to do things with AI that no one could do before. And there'll be new ways to work with it. But like when the calculator was invented, there were people who said, no matter how good this calculator gets, I'm going to stay better at arithmetic. These people who were just really great at it. And no one can outrun the calculator. But that was okay because, we use the calculator and we start doing more complex math. In any given area, it'll be the same thing. You will not outrun the AI on raw horsepower. That's over. That's probably over this year. But using the tools, you can do all sorts of new things that will just not be possible. What I think it's going to be like is that every person has access to, as if they ran the best, most competent company on earth. And you can go in the same way that if you ran that company, you can come up with ideas and ask the people that work at the company to do it and figure out how to orchestrate that. You can do that with AI. So everybody can go do that. And amazing new things will come out of it. But the skills that you need in that world are figuring out what people want, sort of creative vision, quick adaptability, resilience as everything is changing around you, and the sort of learning how to work with these tools to do way more than people could without it, but not trying to say I'm going to outrun the calculator.
All right, so I think that's fascinating. The idea that he's saying, don't try to think that you can stay ahead of this even now. And by the end of this year, nobody will be able to out-program it or outthink it. I think that that's a very interesting concept. Of course, most of us use these systems today and realize they outpaced us a long time ago, if we're being honest. But at the same time, thinking for the world, stop worrying about being the best at something and let AI do what it does well and try to learn how to work with it. I think that's a really fascinating idea. The idea that every person basically runs the best company in the world, I don't think we're ready for. I don't think anybody understands what that begins to look like. If I was given a set of tools and I could do anything that I could imagine, I might be able to very quickly reach kind of a proof of concept level that today takes at least a year for a company that has a good idea and wants to move forward on it. What that might actually look like is many, many people have startups. And in fact, many people have mini startups. So I'm not really sure that we're aware of what that will do from a society standpoint or for an impact for an economy or something like that. I think it's a really interesting concept. And if he's saying that these tools are already on the road to do that, maybe by the end of this year or next year, there's something really important for us to start talking about here.
So that means that, we as human, would also should adapt to this new technology. And then it's a kind of co-evolving situation.
I think co-evolution of society and technology is the exact right framework. It's not. I think that the wrong way to think about it is just this thing is going to happen. It's going to it's going to beat us at everything. What will happen is it'll be step by step evolving together, and what we do will be unimaginable to people that used to have to work without this technology. Think about what someone can do today relative to what someone was capable of 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. The possibilities go up, the expectation goes up too, and you have to learn how to work differently with these tools. But I think the ceiling is going to be very, very high.
By the way, there's a book called Co-Intelligence by a Wharton professor named Ethan Mollick. It's short; it's about 100 pages, but it's got a lot of really thoughtful writing about how he teaches with AI and how students can think about working with AI. I think it's well worth the read.
This is a point I couldn't agree more with, this co-evolution, the idea that we have to adapt with these tools and not push against them, or not expect them to just take over and do everything. That, I don't believe, is the actual future. I mean, it may be the future relatively far in the future, but in the relatively near future, what these relatives are, I'm not sure. I apologize. 10 years, 20 years, not really sure, maybe 100 years. But in this relative near future that we can kind of begin to see, it's very difficult as fast as AI is changing to really make sense of what it will look like even next year when you really start looking at the advancements that we're seeing. And we'll hear Sam talk a little bit about that in a second. This idea that we have these advancements changing so dramatically, orders of magnitude changes in very short periods of time, it makes it really difficult to understand what things look like in the future. We talk about it all the time. We hear in the news people talking about what does work look like, what does income look like, what does the economy look like. And I think these things are tremendously important for us to actually start discussing and having some idea about. This stuff is actually coming. It may not come next year. Maybe Sam is being too optimistic. Maybe I'm too optimistic. But it will come, and it will come very soon. It will not be 2030 before this stuff hits us. So if it's that close, if it's within arm's reach, we should start planning for it at least a little bit now, actively planning for the best we can see of it now. I really think that that's important. This coevolution concept is something that I think that we're not paying much attention to. We're just assuming it will either do everything and it's hopeless, or don't worry about it, it's just a set of tools. And I don't think either of those are actually true.
What emergent properties would you expect from ChatGPT if you had 100 times more computing power? I know it's incrementally getting smarter, but something qualitatively new?
Yeah. So we're trying to find out. We're doing this new project called Stargate that has about 100 times the computing power of our current computer because we want to answer exactly that question. We used to be in a paradigm where we only did pre-training, and each GPT number, 1, 2, 3, 4, each of those was exactly 100x of, or not exactly, but very close to 100x. And at each of those, there was a major new emergent thing. Internally, we've gone all the way to about maybe like a 4.5. So if you want to get to a 5.5, you would need that 100x more. I'll come back to that in a second. The most important thing that happened in the field, or at least to us in the last year, is these new models that can do reasoning. They are an incredible new compute efficiency gain. And we can get performance on a lot of benchmarks that in the old world we would have predicted wouldn't have come until GPT-6, something like that, from models that are much smaller by doing this reinforcement learning. So we kind of have a sense. Now, the trick is when we do it this new way, it doesn't get better at everything. We can get it better in certain dimensions. But we can now, I think, more intelligently than before say that if we were able to pre-train a much bigger model and do this, where it would be. And the thing that I would expect based off of what we're seeing with a jump like that is the first bits or sort of signs of life on genuine new scientific knowledge. So right now, GPT-4 can, or that's even too easy. Let's say like O3, our very latest, best model. That can program unbelievably well. And if people have already done it, it's not so good at going to like invent totally new algorithms. And or new physics or new biology. And that's the thing I think you'll get with the next 2 orders of magnitude. It's really quite, the progress over the recent scale is quite amazing. Our very first reasoning model was like a top 1 millionth competitive programmer in the world. People thought that was very impressive. It's like, wow, in AI, it's, millionth best people that do this. That's pretty good. We then had a model that got to like top 10,000. O3, which we talked about publicly in December, is the 175th best competitive programmer in the world. I think our internal benchmark is now around 50, and maybe we'll hit number 1 by the end of this year. So that's like an amazing rate of scale for more compute in this new paradigm, and we don't see any signs of that stopping.
Oh my goodness, there's just so much in that little section that he's talking about. So the question is basically, if we could give you magically 2 orders of magnitude stronger computers, what do you think could be done? What could be discovered? And Sam answers right away saying that's exactly what we're trying to do with Project Stargate, which is this $500 billion project, 2 or 3 year project, I think is the roadmap, where they're working with SoftBank, NVIDIA, and Microsoft, and Oracle to build out 20 ginormous data centers across the US. It'll increase the infrastructure across the US, theoretically create jobs and all of the other things that we really want from an infrastructure project. But it sounds like what he's very interested in is being able to generate and link these data centers together, which has been hinted at, is that 100 kind of 2 orders of magnitude increase that we're looking at. And so within a couple of years, we'll be at that place. However, the other things that he covered was talking about, very interestingly, going from GPT-2 to 3 to 4, all were basically 2 orders of magnitude, 100-fold increase from the previous one, so every generation. And we might think that we're releasing one of these a year, one of these every 14, 16 months kind of thing seems to be the rough cadence that they're currently working under. And as we know, GPT-4.5 has been announced. It should be coming out anytime now. And GPT-5 is theoretically in the middle of this year, maybe by the end of the year at the latest. And that, by the way, very exciting. What he was talking about is 100 times the GPT-4 that was released. This little snippet of a conversation has just so much in it. He's saying that the reasoning models, that reinforcement learning and reasoning aspect, so test time compute, letting the model do some work to evaluate its answer, to enhance its answer, is the reasoning aspect. And the reinforcement learning that DeepSeek and others kind of have shown an unlock to really get us to 100-fold better than where they expected to be. He's saying that what they're seeing now with their reasoning models is where they may be expected to be if they were lucky by GPT-6, which is essentially putting us 2 years on the roadmap ahead. And he doesn't see that stopping. And of course, what we've heard is 4.5 will be the last non-thinking model, and everything beyond that will have some kind of test time compute capacity. So really, really fascinating stuff in all of this. It's worth saying he also mentioned that the GPT-6 timeframe maybe is what we're talking about. He sees new, true scientific discovery being possible, whereas today it's just not possible. They don't have the capacity to do completely novel things at this point. But in, let's say, a year and a half, if we're staying on the same cadence, then we might be at that place. And this goes back to some of the earlier comments that he was making about just how far ahead we will be in the middle of next year or something like that. And not to overlook kind of the elephant in the room for a lot of the people that are sitting in this room is he said their first thinking model was maybe the millionth best programmer. And he's talking competitive programmer, which is a particular kind of programming, but it's valid. It's worth describing this as a evaluative programming skill. And then by the time they got to 03, that was at 173. So he's saying internally they're at 50 already, and he believes that they'll be number 1 by the end of the year. That's fascinating. So it's really worth hearing. These things, full stop, will be better than essentially all of us at programming. Now, admittedly, being able to solve a puzzle that may be a very complex puzzle in a programming environment versus being able to see kind of novel solutions in a highly complex programming environment, those are very different aspects. So it might be a little bit of time before the thinking systems can get enough context around everything. Once they do, they're going to outpace everything. It's just clear. Okay, we have 2 more. It's Sam's thoughts on whether or not they should have stayed open source. I know, Elon, just settle down. And then my favorite, I'm saving for the end. It was near the end of this talk anyway, so it works out perfectly. That one's coming up soon.
Earlier, you mentioned making intelligence accessible to everybody. And with the recent release of China's DeepSeek AI, along with the open publication of their weights and architecture, the validity of OpenAI's shift away from open source has been called into question. Are there any plans to reconsider that stance, and what would be the justification?
Yeah, we're going to do it. I don't know exactly what we're going to open source or exactly when, but it does seem to us like the direction of travel is towards more open models available, and that society is willing to take the trade-offs, at least for now, that come with that. And I think we've made good progress on getting these models to be generally safe and robust. In open source uses, they won't all be used that way, but they will be most of the time. So yeah, I'd expect us to move in that direction.
Okay, there you have it. That's Sam. A couple weeks ago, he was quoted as saying that maybe OpenAI was on the wrong side of the open source debate, and that he was interested in exploring open sourcing things. And now already he's saying, yeah, we're going to do this. So that's great to hear. Frankly, I think that that's a really wonderful thing for AI in general. I think the growth, we've seen this just from DeepSeek releasing one major innovation very recently, and it's already being adopted by many of the model makers. So it really, from a scientific standpoint, is great to have this open sourced. But also from a societal standpoint, I think it likely is really the right direction. It has the potential to share this kind of intelligence with the world and not just with closed operators. All right, let's dive back in. This is the last one. It, to me, is the most exciting one. It's very small, how it's mentioned, and I'm super excited about it. I don't know that everybody else is, but let's give a listen to how Sam thinks the future of AI is going to be powered.
Thank you. I was wondering if you have any questions to our students.
What would you like us to build? Like, what would make you be like, I love ChatGPT much more?
Okay, who wants to answer that?
I'm not a power user like maybe some other students here of ChatGPT, but because I'm concerned about the environmental footprint of my actions. And I'm really interested in the plans that you have on this dimension of ChatGPT in your products.
Two things. We obviously really care. Actually, three things. We really are super passionate about this. Number one, we have reduced the cost per token from an energy basis by about 1,000x. So to any given query uses extremely little electricity now. Like the O3 mini model is really just this tiny thing. Now, the trade-off, of course, is you make something cheaper, people just use a lot more of it. So there's that piece as well. The thing number two is one of the areas that we specially focus on, and we will do more in the future for using AI for science, is climate in general and clean energy in particular. Also open to carbon capture, radical ideas like solar radiation, whatever. But I think we have evidently not been smart enough to really truly solve climate issues on our own. And using these tools to help us get there, I think is my best idea about what we're going to do. And then third is, I think the world is very close to commercially viable fusion, and that will completely change the landscape, AI and beyond. But if that quickly becomes the cheapest energy source on Earth and runs at a super safe, super reliable way, which I think it will, then everyone's going to switch to it fast. You see a few examples in history where an energy revolution happened, and if you can like undercut costs by a multiple, like 2x, 3x, to say nothing of 10x, the world changes very fast.
Okay, that was a great question by that student asking about the climate impact of using these LLMs. If you recall, a year or so ago, it was estimated that each one of these queries was 3 or 4 watt hours, which is a tremendous amount of electricity, actually, for something as simple as this. And just recently, a few weeks ago, a study was concluded to show that the current models, GPT-4, I don't even know if it was 4.0, was consuming something like 0.3 watt hours. And to put an example on that one, the one that everybody references, is that's about the same as a Google search, which is great. But I looked up a few others and it's kind of interesting. An LED light, the tiny little indicator lights that you have, if you leave one of those on for an hour, an unplugged phone charger expends 0.3 watt hours as well, apparently. So very interesting. And Sam even references that O3 Mini has even less of a footprint than some of these currently studied models that were in the report. And I think that has to do with the models are much smaller and thus can effectively per query do much less. They have to activate far fewer parameters, things like that. But at the same time, being thinking models, they have the potential of running back and doing multiple queries per pass. So it's all a questionable judgment anyway, but it is very interesting to hear the concept of it has gotten 1,000-fold cheaper from an electricity spend standpoint to do these kinds of things. And so that's fantastic. That will only, of course, continue to be true. However, his second point was AI has a high likelihood, especially as we reach that ChatGPT 6 thing or GPT 6 that we were just talking about, where it can start inventing new concepts and being novel in its approach to things. It has a very high likelihood or chance of helping us solve some climate problem issues that we can't currently seem to solve on our own. And so maybe just getting to that point with AI is actually the saving point. You know, it's an optimistic viewpoint. I share it, but at the same time, it's a very optimistic viewpoint. I'm okay when people don't agree with me on that point. But the last one is the one. This was the thing that was just fascinating to me. He said this previously off the cuff somewhere, so I could never get a quote of it, but this one is great where he's directly talking about it. He is saying that commercial fusion power is near. Now, I've heard about fusion my entire life, this promise of this endless source of energy, and decade after decade after decade, there was no real movement on it. It just kind of was this slow crawl toward this ideal of imagine if we could ever do that. And very recently, late last year, there was an announcement of fusion power actually producing more than was put in for the first time, and really a path toward maybe being able to productize that. I'll believe it when I see it just because I've been waiting for so long to see this come to pass, but it's very exciting to hear something like, fusion power, of course, that these are just, it would be similar to, when everybody can breathe underwater. It's that kind of thing to me. So this one's fascinating, really exciting to hear about that. Okay, so this was a fun one. I just wanted to go into these comments because I felt like some of the things that Sam was saying, I very often agree with him. I, of course, as I've mentioned multiple times, I'm an optimist on all of this stuff as well, and very hopeful, and think that it's coming and probably coming in a very helpful way to us, not the harmful way that, science fiction would tell us it's coming. So I just wanted to share some of the thoughts that he had in this video and let you hear it from him and judge for yourself whether or not what he is saying feels unlikely or if it's too far afield or if it really is about to happen and you're still worried about it. That's entirely understandable if that's true. Thanks for coming along for the ride on this one, and I'll see you in the next one.